I'm not really sure why I'm writing this, other than the fact that I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since it happened. I'm a 31-year-old man, and I live in a house that used to belong to my mother. After she passed away, my sister and I decided to keep it instead of selling. The house is a 2-floor, mother-daughter style home. Basically, it's one building split into 2 living spaces. My sister lives downstairs. I live upstairs. We each have our own kitchen, our own living room, our own bedrooms. The only thing we really share is the structure itself, and the stairs. Most nights, though, my sister isn't even here. She stays with her boyfriend a lot. He lives about half an hour away, and she'll usually spend several nights at his place in a row. Sometimes a whole week will go by without me seeing her. And normally, that doesn't bother me. But the night this happened, she was gone. And I was completely alone. I remember it clearly because I was watching a horror movie in my living room upstairs. Nothing special, just something I'd seen before. I like background noise when I'm alone, even if it's something creepy. It makes the silence feel less heavy. My living space is an open layout. The living room, dining area, and kitchen are all connected in one large room. The couch sits right in the middle of it. So when I'm sitting there watching TV, my back is facing most of the room. I didn't think about that when I first sat down. But as the movie went on, I became more aware of it. The lights were off, and the only illumination came from the TV, casting faint reflections across the walls. Every now and then, I caught myself looking over my shoulder. Not because I saw anything, just because it felt like I should. I told myself I was being stupid. I'm in my 30s. I live in a safe neighborhood. I was just letting the movie get to me. Eventually, the credits rolled. I turned off the TV, brushed my teeth, shut off the lights, and went to bed. I put my phone on the nightstand and fell asleep almost instantly. At least, I think I did. Because the next thing I remember is waking up suddenly, with that strange feeling you get when something pulls you out of sleep too fast. At first, I didn't know why I was awake. Then I heard it. A voice. It was coming from downstairs. I stayed still, listening, trying to figure out if I was still dreaming. But the voice came again, clearer this time. It sounded exactly like my sister. Not whispering. Not screaming. Just loud enough to carry through the floor, like she was talking to someone or calling out from another room. My first thought was that she must have come home unexpectedly. Maybe she and her boyfriend had argued. Maybe she needed something. I checked the time on my phone. 1:04 a.m. I was still half asleep, not really thinking straight. I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. It was completely dark. I turned on the hallway light and started toward the stairs. That's when I heard her again. This time, there was no mistaking it. She was calling my name. I answered back without even thinking. Yeah. What's going on? No response. I walked down the stairs, each step creaking softly beneath my feet. When I reached the bottom, I tried to find the light switch in the foyer, but my hands brushed over empty wall. I remember feeling unusually groggy, like my body was moving before my brain caught up. I walked down the short hallway toward my sister's kitchen and found the light switch there. When I flipped it on, the overhead light flickered, starting dim and slowly growing brighter. The kitchen was empty. So was the living room. No shoes by the door. No purse. No jacket draped over a chair. Nothing. I stood there for a moment, confused, trying to process it. Emily. I called out. No answer. I walked to her bedroom and turned on the light. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. The room looked untouched, exactly the way it always does when she hasn't been home. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I stepped back into the hallway, about to head upstairs, when I heard it. A sudden, heavy sound. Something dropped onto the floor inside my sister's bedroom. I froze. My heart started racing as I slowly turned back toward the room I had just checked. I stepped inside again, scanning the floor, the dresser, the nightstand. Nothing was out of place. There was nothing on the floor. Nothing that could have made that noise. I didn't stay down there any longer. I went back upstairs as fast as I could, locked myself in my bedroom, and grabbed my phone. I called my sister. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I texted her, asking if she had come home earlier. No reply. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep with the light on. In the morning, I woke up to a text from her. She asked why I had called her several times around 1 in the morning. I called her back immediately and asked if she had been home the night before. She said no. She had stayed at her boyfriend's place all night. When I told her what I heard, she laughed it off. Said I must have been dreaming. Half asleep. That it was probably nothing. I wanted to believe that. But after we hung up, I went downstairs one last time and checked her bedroom again. The floor was clean. There wasn't a single object that could have fallen. I still try to tell myself it was a hallucination. Some kind of sleep-related episode. That explanation feels safer. But I've never experienced anything like that before. And I know how real her voice sounded. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm alone upstairs, I catch myself listening. Waiting. Because part of me is afraid that one night, I'll hear my name again. And next time, I don't know if I'll answer. I'm 23 years old, and I still live at home with my parents. That alone shouldn't matter. Plenty of people my age do. But what matters is that this is the house I grew up in. I've lived here my entire life. I know how it sounds when the heat turns on. I know which steps creak on the stairs. I know when something feels off. That's why what happened that day stuck with me. My parents were both gone. I don't even remember where they were going. Just that they wouldn't be back until later. I had the house to myself, and it was quiet in that comfortable, familiar way. It was a nice day, so I went outside to shoot some hoops in the front yard. We have a basketball hoop set up near the driveway, and I'd been out there for a while, just playing casually. No music. No phone. Just the sound of the ball hitting concrete. At some point, I went to chase down a rebound. That's when I looked up at the house. And that's when I saw her. She was standing in one of the upstairs windows. She wasn't moving. She wasn't waving. She was just standing there, looking down at me. She wasn't my mom. She wasn't my sister. She was a woman I had never seen before. For a moment, my brain tried to make sense of it. I remember thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe the light hit the glass weird. But the longer I looked, the more certain I became. When she noticed that I was staring at her, she stepped back quickly. She disappeared from the window. I didn't hesitate. I dropped the basketball where it was and ran inside the house. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart already pounding by the time I reached the second floor. I went straight to the lounge room, the exact room where I had just seen her. It was empty. No open windows. No disturbed furniture. No sign anyone had been there. I started checking every room upstairs. Every bedroom. The bathroom. Every closet. Nothing. I went downstairs next, moving faster now. The living room. The kitchen. The dining area. The spare bedroom. More closets. Still nothing. By this point, confusion had turned into something heavier. Something colder. The only place left was the basement. Our basement isn't very big. There are a couple of old couches, a small bar area, and 2 closets. That's it. There aren't many places for someone to hide, which somehow made it worse. I checked the first closet. Empty. Then I stood in front of the second one. This was the last place. The last unchecked space in the entire house. I didn't ease the door open. I yanked it, hard, like ripping off a bandage, and immediately lunged forward, ready to jump whoever might be inside. Instead, I slammed into a wall of coats and hangers. I stood there, breathing hard, my mind racing. I wasn't about to question my sanity. I knew what I saw. It wasn't vague. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't something you just imagine. I went back upstairs and screamed, loudly, that whoever was in my house needed to get the hell out. I screamed so loud that my next-door neighbor came over to check on me. I told him everything. That I saw a woman standing inside my house, watching me from the upstairs window. He didn't brush it off. He grabbed a flashlight and helped me search the house again. We still didn't find her. The only explanation we could come up with was that she must have slipped out through the back door. I had unlocked it earlier when I went outside to grab the basketball. After my neighbor left, I locked every door and called my parents. They weren't thrilled, but they told me to check if anything was missing. Nothing was. That night, I checked the house one more time before going to bed. Every door, every room, every lock. Even then, it took a long time to fall asleep. My mind kept replaying the image of her standing in that window. Most people don't know what it feels like to see a stranger inside their home, watching them. I was finally starting to drift off when I heard something. At first, I didn't move. I had the ceiling fan on, so the room wasn't silent. But the sound came again. It wasn't mechanical. It sounded like movement. Slow movement. I turned onto my other side. And there she was. She was crawling out from under my bed. She rose up slowly, standing tall beside it. I screamed. I jumped out of bed and tackled her to the floor, my hands around her throat, yelling, asking who she was and what she was doing in my house. The doorbell rang. It was my neighbor again. I dragged the woman toward the front door as she kicked and scratched at me. I still have scars on my right arm from where she dug her nails in. My neighbor came inside and helped me restrain her while I called the police. The entire time we waited, she screamed and cursed at us, making threats. She looked filthy, erratic, and completely unhinged. The best way I can describe her is that she looked like someone deep into drug withdrawal. When the police arrived, one of the officers recognized her immediately. They had dealt with her before. Her name was Karen. Watching her get put into the back of the police car was the first time I felt like I could breathe again. That night, I still couldn't sleep. But mixed in with the fear was something else. Because now I understood something I hadn't earlier. She wasn't watching me from that window out of curiosity. She was checking to see if I was alone. And she wasn't trying to escape the house. She had already decided to stay. I don't tell this story very often. Not because it's unbelievable, but because every time I think about it, I'm reminded of how helpless I felt that night. Even now, years later, certain details still come back to me with uncomfortable clarity. I grew up being home alone a lot. My mom was a single parent for most of my childhood. She worked as a registered nurse, and her schedule was brutal: overnight shifts, weekends, holidays. My older brother had already gone away to college by the time this happened, so there were nights when the house felt far too big for just one kid. This happened when I was 14. It was a weekend night, and my mom was working overnight. I remember feeling excited in that immature way kids do when they have the house to themselves. Not because I wanted to do anything bad, just because the freedom felt good. Earlier that evening, I had a girl over. Her name was Molly. We were talking at the time, the kind of awkward, nervous talking where you're both pretending not to care too much. We watched a couple of movies in my room, sat on opposite sides of the bed, laughed quietly so we wouldn't disturb the neighbors. After a while, she had to leave. Her parents didn't like her staying out late. I walked her to the door and watched her car disappear down the street. Then I went back upstairs. I turned the TV on and laid on my bed, flipping through channels, feeling tired but comfortable. My bedroom was upstairs at the back of the house, facing the backyard. There was a wooden deck directly below my window, with a few plastic chairs my mom kept out there. I was half watching the TV when I heard a sound that made me sit up instantly. A long scraping noise. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Someone was dragging one of the deck chairs. I froze, listening, my heart starting to beat faster. The sound stopped. For a second, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe the wind. Maybe an animal. But deep down, I knew better. I got out of bed slowly and walked toward the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see outside. There was someone sitting on one of the chairs. My first thought was Molly. She had only left a few minutes earlier. Maybe she forgot something. Maybe she was trying to scare me. I opened the window a little and called her name. Molly. The person looked up at me, and I knew immediately it wasn't her. I couldn't see his face clearly in the dark, but I could tell he was an adult. Larger than me. Broader. Completely unfamiliar. The moment I realized that, I pulled back from the window and crouched down beside my bed, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might give me away. I grabbed my phone and texted a group chat with a few close friends, asking if any of them were outside my house messing with me. They all said no. They were confused. Concerned. One of them asked if I was joking. I wasn't. After a few minutes, curiosity and fear mixed together in my chest. I stood up again and slowly looked out the window. He was still there. Still sitting in the chair. Still looking directly at my window. At that point, there was no pretending anymore. He knew I was there. He had seen me. I turned off the TV and climbed onto my bed, pulling my knees to my chest. I sat completely still. I didn't even turn my phone screen on. The window was slightly open, and I was terrified he'd hear any movement I made. I wanted him to think I had left the room. I stayed like that for several minutes, barely breathing. Eventually, I convinced myself there was no way he was still there. When I finally stood up and looked again, my stomach dropped. He hadn't moved. That's when I did something I regret. I leaned out just a little and asked him what he wanted. For a second, nothing happened. Then his shoulders started to shake. He was laughing. At first, there was no sound, just the movement. Then I heard a faint, wheezing, whistling noise. Like he was laughing so hard he couldn't catch his breath. I asked him to please go away. I didn't wait for an answer. I backed away from the window and left my room, moving quietly to the top of the stairs. I sat there in the dark, listening. That's when I heard the back door. Someone was pushing on it. Slowly, carefully, testing it. Panic took over. I ran back to my room, shut the window completely, pulled the curtains closed, and locked the door. Not long after, I heard the front door being tried too. He didn't give up immediately. Eventually, though, the house went quiet again. I didn't leave my room for the rest of the night. I stayed awake until my mom got home around 9 in the morning. When I told her what happened, she was angry at me for not calling the police. And she was right. I was 14, skinny, weak, and completely unprepared to handle something like that. If the doors hadn't been locked, I don't know what would have happened. But the part that still bothers me the most isn't that night. It's what came after. For years, I told myself he was just some random person. Someone passing through. Someone who moved on. But every once in a while, when I'm alone late at night, I think about the way he laughed. Not loud. Not threatening. Almost amused. Like he wasn't angry. Like he wasn't desperate. Like he had time. And sometimes, I wonder if he was just memorizing the house. Just tell me how far you want to push it. I don't tell this story very often. Not because I've forgotten it, but because remembering it still makes my chest feel tight. Some nights come back to you in pieces. Sounds. Shadows. Moments that never really faded. This was one of those nights. I was 10 years old. At that age, you don't understand how close you are to real danger. You trust that adults know what they're doing. You assume that if something bad happens, someone will stop it. That night taught me how wrong that assumption can be. My family had 5 people in it. My parents. My older brother, who was 14. My little sister, who was 5. And me, right in the middle. It was a Friday night. I remember because Fridays felt safe. School was over. The weekend was starting. Nothing bad was supposed to happen on a Friday night. I was in my bedroom, sitting on the floor, playing a Star Wars game on my PlayStation. My door was closed. The TV volume was up just enough that I could lose myself in it. Then I heard my mom cry. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't normal. It was the kind of sound that makes your stomach drop before you even understand why. I paused the game and ran out of my room. My mom was standing in the kitchen, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles were white. She was shaking, crying. My dad was standing next to her, trying to calm her down. I didn't understand everything being said, but I understood enough. The hospital had called. My brother had been hit by a car. The house felt different after that. Like the walls were listening. My parents spoke quickly. My mom couldn't stop crying. My dad kept telling her that he was going to be okay. Seeing my dad like that helped. If he believed it, I believed it too. They moved fast. My dad grabbed his coat. My mom went to get my little sister. They asked me if I'd be okay staying home alone. I said yes. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't want to see my brother hurt. I didn't want to be another problem they had to deal with. So they left. And the house became very quiet. I went back to my room and turned my game back on. I played longer than I normally would have. I think I was trying not to think. Hours passed. By the time I turned everything off, it was past midnight. Way past my bedtime. I crawled into bed with my Game Boy and closed my bedroom door. At some point, I heard the front door open. I stopped moving. For a moment, I felt relief. My parents must be back. Maybe everything was okay. I turned off my Game Boy and listened. I didn't hear voices. I didn't hear footsteps on the stairs. I waited. Nothing happened. That's when the feeling started. That quiet, sinking feeling that something wasn't right. I got out of bed and slowly opened my bedroom door. I walked to the banister that overlooked the living room. The lights downstairs were off. And there were 3 people standing in the living room. They were tall. All of them. Just dark shapes against darker shadows. They weren't my parents. My body locked up. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember thinking. I just remember slowly backing away, closing my bedroom door as quietly as I could. It made a sound. A small one, but loud enough. I ran to my closet. I opened the door, stepped inside, and shut it behind me. I crouched down behind boxes and bags of clothes, pressing myself as far back as I could. I waited. Every sound felt too loud. My heartbeat. My breathing. The blood rushing in my ears. Then my bedroom door opened. Footsteps entered the room. I couldn't tell how many people there were. I heard them walk to my bed. I heard my blankets being lifted. Moved. Then nothing. Then footsteps again. Closer. Toward the closet. The door opened. I didn't look up. I didn't move. I held my breath. The door stayed open. For a long time. Later, I guessed it must have been around 20 seconds. Then it closed. The footsteps left my room. I stayed in that closet until I heard my parents come home. I ran downstairs, crying, trying to explain what happened. That's when we saw the front door, still open. The people had broken in while my parents were gone. They stole valuables. Things we could never replace. My parents were devastated. They had left in such a rush that they forgot to lock the door. I was lucky. I know that now. Because even years later, I still think about the way that closet door stayed open. About the silence. I wonder if the person standing there saw me. And I wonder why, if they did, they chose to close the door anyway.